Hey everybody, I just want to let you know that I made these predictions in this video on Monday before the tournament, so take with a grain of salt everything that I'm about to say. Thank you. Hey everybody, today I'm going to be making my bracket picks for the 2025 NCAA men's basketball tournament, and let's get started using the ESPN brackets. I'm really excited to, get to choose this and can't wait to see how this goes. Let's start with the South region. Granted that it's the first one that you see when you go on the ESPN site. Start with 116. Got Auburn either against Alabama State or St. Francis. I'm going to pick Auburn here. Only 2 times ever that a 16 has beat a 1, and I don't see that changing in this matchup. The 8-9. Louisville Creighton, tough one to pick here. I think that Louisville was probably seated a little bit lower than they should have, and I think that Creighton maybe was also seated a little bit lower than they should have been as well, at a 9 seed, finishing second in the Big East, losing in the Big East Championship to Rick Pitino's St. John's team. This is a tough one. Can Creighton get a lot of production from Ryan Kalkbrenner in the paint? Can they get Stephen Ashworth to be consistently hitting from outside? He's been really good from the outside, and he's been a force in terms of assists as well for the Blue Jays team. And Creighton, they've played well in the last few tournaments. Haven't quite got to the Final Four just yet, but I think this would be an interesting matchup, and I'm going to take Creighton in this match. I think it's going to really be a match that's going to see a mix of Ashworth shooting from the outside, and then for Louisville, you're probably going to see something from Chucky Hepburn. He's going to need to play a really good game to get himself on top. Next, 5-12, Michigan versus UC San Diego. UC San Diego making the tournament for the first time. Michigan, what a turnaround they've had after finishing 8-24 last season. New coach Dusty May, a couple new transfers, and Danny Wolf, Vladislav Golden coming from FAU with Dusty May. As much as I would love to see the Tritons go through, I think that Michigan, with their big men, with Golden and Wolf, is going to find a way to get it done. I think it's also going to depend on, can they get the outside shooting from Trey Donaldson, and also will Roddy Gale Jr. be fit enough, and can he play extended minutes in this game, because we saw him irritate his hamstring a little bit in the Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin. So I think that'll be interesting factors that play here. 4th-ranked Texas A&M and Yale at the 13th seed. Again, another tough matchup. I think it'll be interesting to see who goes through. Part of me wants to say Texas A&M, but part of me also wants to say Yale, because Yale, they've upset some opponents in the past. I think Purdue was one of them. They beat Auburn last year in the same 4-13 seed. It's going to be hard to tell. Can Texas A&M get the offense going, because at times they've looked really good and at other times they haven't looked so good. But for this one, I'm going to go with the upset. I'm going to say Yale gets through. Texas A&M has had points where they've faltered, and I think that they've had a good season, but do they have enough gas after the reset, getting out early in the SEC tournament? Can they find a way to get back? Heck, I don't think so. I think that Yale, they were the last team that was undefeated in conference play. Only had one loss in the Ivy League, 13-1. Grinded out a win against Cornell, and grinded out a semifinal win in that Ivy League tournament as well against Princeton. I think they know how to play close games. They know how to have a high-scoring offense. I think they can find a way to be efficient, and I'm gonna go for Yale in this upset. Next, we've got in the 6-11, we've got Ole Miss against the winner of San Diego State and North Carolina. I'm going to go with the Rebels here because I just don't see either the Aztecs or the Tar Heels, with the way that their seasons ended, being able to rebound and continue that momentum.
Bruh.
North Carolina lost in the ACC semifinals to Duke, where they almost came back against the Blue Devils, but just were down, just that margin that they were down 20-plus points, just a little bit too much for them. And they don't have a ton of quad one wins as well, and I think that was a big point of contention as to why they were included in the tournament over a team, say, like Indiana, Ohio State, most notably West Virginia, getting a lot of gripe there. But I will say on the counter for West Virginia, if you lose as an 8 seed to the 16 in the Big 12 tournament in that first game you're playing, that's not a good look, and it certainly doesn't help there. So we've got that. In 3 and 14, we've got Iowa State and Lipscomb. So Lipscomb, champions out of the Atlantic Sun. Iowa State fell in the quarterfinals of the Big 12 to BYU 96-92. It's an interesting matchup. You know, Iowa State has gone to the tournament each of the 4 years under TJ Otzelberger, and Lipscomb, this is their second ever appearance. First one, I believe, since 2017 or 2018. And the Bisons, they've got a good offense. They know how to play well, but I just don't think they have enough big play down in the paint. They've got a lot of good outside shooting from guys like Joe Anderson. And Iowa State, they always find a way to be creative, you know. Put up 92 points against BYU in that loss against them in the quarterfinals, like I mentioned. They've got a couple bigs in Deshaun Jackson, Joshua Jefferson, and they will be down a big scorer in Keyshawn Gilbert, who won't be playing in the tournament, but they may be getting back their point guard, Tamin Lipsey, who's got one of the highest assist-to-turnover ratios in the nation. So I'm going to go with the Iowa State Cyclones here just by the way that they've played. I think it'll be important if they get Milan Momcilovic going, if they can find guys like Nate Heisey, maybe control his fouling a little bit, because he does tend to pick up 4 fouls by the time you get down to, you know, the last 6-7 minutes. So if they can control that element there. Also, if they find a way to get Jefferson to play well in the paint, back guys down, that'll be really important. So I'm going to put the Cyclones through in this match. Next, we've got the 7-10 match between Marquette and New Mexico. New Mexico had a great season out of the Mountain West. Marquette, another solid season for them. This one's a tough one, simply because you've got two different teams that play two different styles. You've got basically, it's going to be, I think Cam Jones is going to find a way to get past Donovan Dent, or vice versa. Donovan Dent is the man who leads the pack for the Lobos, and you know, I'm going to go with Marquette in this matchup. I think they've got better outside shooting, although New Mexico does have higher, or you know, they've got a lot of good outside play. I also think that they don't really have an established big guy down in the post, and I think that if Marquette gets hot, they, you know, tend to ride that momentum pretty well. But I think it's going to be a close game. 7-10 seeds always bring out a good game in this one, and so that's why I'm going with Marquette. And finally, in the South region, we've got the 2 seed Michigan State against Bryant, the 15 seed champions of the America East. I'm going to go with the Spartans on this one. I think this is going to be relatively easy for the Spartans. Granted, they have been upset a couple times. They were upset as a 2 seed by Middle Tennessee State, so always have to be careful with that. But I think the experience that Tom Izzo has and the way that Cone Carr, Jace Richardson are playing, it's a lot of star power, and I think that if Bryant finds themselves behind early, it's just going to put them into a big, big hole. And I think that's why we're going to see the Michigan State Spartans going through. So we'll go ahead in this format. We'll just finish out the region, and then we'll go region by region, and then eventually to the Final Four. So in this, we've got Auburn-Creighton, Janai Broome, really good. Nomar Baker Mazara, as well, is really good. I think that they'll find a way with their high-scoring offense to put up a lot of points against Creighton, although it's going to be an interesting battle if Ryan Cockbrenner and Janai Broome go at it in the post. You know, Ryan Cockbrenner, 4-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year. I just don't think it's going to be enough. I'm going to put the Tigers into the Sweet 16 in this matchup. All right, Michigan-Yale in that second round. Another case of big guys is for Michigan, and can they, match that guard play that Yale has? And I'm going to say that the big guys is going to take Michigan through. Vladislav Golden, Danny Wolf. I mean, you got 2 7-footers who are going to try and block out that post, and they can knock down threes on occasion as well. I think that that's going to be important for the Wolverines if they want to get themselves into the Sweet 16. That's why I've got them there. Next year, Ole Miss, Iowa State. Iowa State, they've made the Sweet 16 in T.J. Otzelberger's first year, defeating Wisconsin in that second round, and they beat LSU in the first round. Were knocked out by Pitt in the first round in 23. And last year, they played well and made it to Sweet 16, where they lost to Illinois, who was then thumped by eventual national champions UConn. In this game, the SEC, 14 teams, and they're all really, really good teams that are going through. I've got Iowa State going through, but I say it's going to be the outside shooting that keeps Ole Miss close. And if you know anything about Iowa State and getting to tournament games, they aren't usually very comfortable when they get past the first round. So I think that that's going to be something to watch there. And lastly, in the second round games in the South region, we've got Marquette, Michigan State. I'm going to go with the Spartans again. I think that the way that they've played this year certainly surprised a lot of people. And the fact that they were the number 1 seed in the Big Ten, just with a bunch of younger guys, was just something phenomenal. And I think that explosiveness that they possess, should they, conserve themselves a little bit in the first round should they win, should I say, is going to get them through the Sweet 16. And now for regional semifinals, we got Auburn, Michigan. I'm not quite sure how the SEC is going to do once we start to get to rounds 3 and 4. Probably going to see less teams in there just because they'll start playing each other. And as simple as that, you're just going to keep knocking them down. In the Auburn-Michigan game, it's a tough call simply because, again, like I've said before, you've got the big guys battling. Golden and Wolf. They're going to go probably against, you could compare them to Janai Broome and Nomar Baker Mazara.
Come on now, dog. Come on, man.
And in this match, I've got the Wolverines going through. They may have been down by quite a bit in that Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin, but the fact that they were able to rebound the ball really well on the defensive end and prevent Wisconsin from getting those chances while they weren't able to create those second chances themselves, not getting a ton of offensive rebounds through the middle portion of the game, is going to be something that's really potentially going to help them. So I've got Michigan going through. I know my bracket's going to be busted day 1, so I'm just going on prediction. And what I think is going to happen. And so I've got Michigan going through to the Elite 8 in this game. And now I've got Iowa State, Michigan State in the Sweet 16. These two teams met in the furthest run that Iowa State ever made in the tournament back in 2000. They met in the Elite Eight, but this prediction would see them potentially going to that meeting in the Sweet 16. I think Iowa State tends to run out of gas around that Sweet 16. They've been to 2 of them in the last 3 years. They just haven't had enough to go on and get it done. And the team, and funny enough, the team that they have lost to in that Sweet 16, those last 2 times that they've been there, eventually lost in the Elite Eight to the eventual national champion. They lost to Miami in 2022, who then lost to Kansas in that regional in Chicago, and won the title down in New Orleans. And they lost to Illinois last year, who lost to UConn in the Elite Eight, went on to win the national championship, and it was a back-to-back. So for this one, my heart wants to see Iowa State make the Elite Eight, but I just don't think that they're going to be able to contend with the explosiveness that Michigan State has. So I'm going to put the Spartans through, as much as I really don't want to see the Spartans go through should the Iowa State make it to that make it to the Sweet 16. I'm going to put the Spartans through in this one, because I just think that they've got a little bit more firepower to them, and I've got a lot more explosiveness that will be able to put them through. And now, the Elite Eight match, we've got a battle of Michigan again. So we got Wolverines, and we've got the Spartans potentially down in Houston for this. The Spartans did win both matchups this year against the Wolverines in regular conference play. The 2 teams did not meet in the tournament. They would have met had the Spartans defeated the Badgers in the semifinals. They would have met as the 1 seed and the 3 seed. But I think this is where Michigan, they've seen Michigan State twice and vice versa. I'm going to say that Michigan State is going to go through because they're able to, contend better and play a little bit better defense against guys like Vladislav Golden and Danny Wolf, Trey Donaldson. Those guys, I just don't think it's going to be enough. But I think nonetheless, Dusty May, taking his schools to the tournament in 3 consecutive years, I think that Michigan State's going to win this regional, and they'll be into the Final Four down in San Antonio from the South region. Now let's take a look at the East region for the NCAA tournament. First, we'll start off with number 1 Duke going up against the winner of American and Mount St. Mary's. I'm going to put Duke through. I think that the 1 seeds in the 16, like I said about the South region, only 2 times has a 16 seed ever beaten a 1. And the last one was 2 years ago when FDU defeated Purdue. I've got Duke going through. I think that they're going to be a better, much better offense. These lower schools, have contended. Don't get me wrong. Duke has been upset as a high seed. It happened with Lehigh out of the Patriot League, and American is coming out of the Patriot League this year. But I just don't see a 16 going through and winning against possibly the best team in the country and an odds-on national championship favorite and the odds-on national champion. 8-9 Mississippi State and Baylor. Baylor, they've got one of the best players. There's one of the best freshmen in the nation, and VJ Edgecombe. Mississippi State, pretty quiet, didn't make a ton of noise during the season, weren't as, highly ranked as, say, a team like Texas A&M, a team like Iowa State or Michigan State or Michigan. They weren't, in that top 5-10 the whole season, but, they were making noise just when they needed to, keeping kind of a lower profile in the SEC, one of the 14 teams to go to the tournament from that conference in what one can only consider to be a pretty historic season for that conference. Only LSU and South Carolina did not make it, having 3-15 and 2-16 conference records respectively. But in this game, if I'm not a fan of the other teams in the Big 12, I love to root for the Big 12 itself. But I'm going to go with Mississippi State in this game. Baylor has, they struggled a little bit, maybe a little bit lower than expectations, and then their expectations for the finish of this season. Didn't play particularly well in the tournament, in the conference tournament, and they have, in the past had a couple upsets where they got nicked by Yale. I think about Torian Prince's pretty crazy but legendary quote.
He had the stat sheet.
Torian said, "How do they have more rebounds?"
You said he got out-rebounded. I was surprised. You did, 36-32. How does Yale out-rebound Baylor?
You go up and grab the ball off the rim when it comes off, and then you grab it with two hands, and you come down with it, and that's considered a rebound. So they got more of those than we did.
You've also got, 10 years ago, this year they were upset by Georgia State, where Ron Hunter fell off his stool.
No timeouts left. What are they doing? R.J. Hunter for three. Ron Hunter has fallen off his stool for good reason. Georgia State up by one. Ron Hunter tipped over his stool after his son made a three to give Georgia State the lead.
And I'm going to put the Bulldogs through in this game, but I think it's going to be close. 8-9 matchups tend to go either way. I think those are probably one of the highest bracket busters, along with, say, a 6-11 or a 5-12. Granted that the teams are so close, it's really hard to tell, but I'm going to have Mississippi State making it through. All right, now we've got 5-12 with Oregon and Liberty. Liberty champions of Conference USA. Oregon placing about the middle in that 8th or 9th place in the Big Ten. Defeated the Indiana Hoosiers in the first round in their play-in for the Big Ten tournament. They lost to top-seeded Michigan State in that quarterfinal. I think the Ducks, weren't always up near the rankings this year, but the fact that they made it in as a 5 seed, I think some contest that they could be a little bit lower, but they played I think they played decently well. I don't know a ton about them, to be totally honest, but I'm gonna go with Oregon in this one, just because Conference USA doesn't tend to be as strong in terms of the teams that they can send to the tournament. Although they have provided us with upsets before, like I mentioned, Middle Tennessee State defeating Michigan State just over a decade ago. But I've got the Ducks going in this one. 4-13 Arizona Akron. Akron, champions of the MAC, came from nearly 20 points down against Miami of Ohio to win the MAC. Arizona went all the way to the Big 12 title game, defeated Kansas and Texas Tech to get there. And, Caleb Love has been having a fantastic season, and I think he's one of the best players in the nation.
3-point game. Too far. Here's Love for the tie.
And he's really found a home for himself at Arizona. Was at UNC for at least a year, and this is going to be an interesting game. But I've got Arizona going through. I think I'm going to see a match of two former Pac-12 members going at it, and two very good teams at that. So, yeah, I've got Arizona going through over Akron. I think they're just a more complete team, but they have to keep their big guys out of foul trouble. That's hurt them, and it's hurt them at times this season. The guys like Vesar are having to sit for an extended period of time. All right, let's go. BYU versus VCU. This is a very interesting matchup. 6 versus 11 tends to be, a popular spoiler, and BYU at the 6, having finished in that 4th place in the Big 12 ahead of Iowa State, lost to Houston pretty considerably in the Big 12 semifinals. But I think the Cougars have played really well. They've got a really good outside shooting game. Don't quite have the paint game as much, but outside shooting is where they've really made a name for themselves and been able to make a lot of noise in the Big 12. VCU, champions of the Atlantic 10, defeated George Mason, who was probably the other team that would have taken their place. Ace number 1 and number 2 going at it this past Sunday. Pretty crazy ending. But I just think that VCU and their ability to keep going back to the tournament and, provide some spoilers and everything is something pretty incredible. And I'm going to pick the Rams in this one. I think we got an upset brewing. Two teams that, face off with each other very well. Mind you, BYU did lose as a 6 seed last year to Duquesne, another Atlantic 10 champion. So, I think history may repeat itself.
Oh my God, who the hell cares?
And so I've got VCU going through. 3 versus 14, Wisconsin against Montana. Montana winning the Big Sky Championship. Wisconsin runners up in the Big Ten, losing to Michigan in that tournament title game. I'm going to go with the Badgers. I think that they, have shown themselves to be one of the better teams in the nation at times. They've got a high-octane offense, but, they don't want to have a repeat performance of what they did against Michigan with a very low shooting percentage from the outside and just in general. And I think you got to watch out for guys like John Tonje, who makes a living at the free throw line. He's going to be somebody you don't want to try and foul, but he's going to go at you, and he's going to try and draw the foul on you. So you're going to have to find a way to, can you shut all the other guys down and also make some offense? And that's the only way that I could see Montana potentially posing some sort of threat to this Badgers team. So now we've got the 7-10, St. Mary's and Vanderbilt. St. Mary's runner-up in the West Coast Conference tournament to Gonzaga. We've got Vanderbilt, who has played pretty well. Mind you, St. Mary's last year was upset by Grand Canyon in the first round, and they don't want to, repeat that. I got the idea that Vanderbilt could spring a surprise, but I just don't think that they've got the same ability as St. Mary's to, contend with that. I'm going to go with the Gales in this one. They've got – Jesus Christ. Like I said, St. Mary's, I think they're going to go through. I think they've got a little bit better team. And let's go move on to the final matchup. We've got Alabama, Robert Morris. Robert Morris coming out of the Horizon League as champions. I just don't think that their offense is going to be able to compete with the Crimson Tide. Also, big question, can Grant Nelson get healthy in time? And if he isn't there for that first round, can Alabama find a way to continue advancing and potentially get him for, say, the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8 should they make it that far? That's going to be a big thing for them. But I've got the Crimson Tide going through. Duke, Mississippi State, going with the Blue Devils again. I think that they're one of the best teams in the nation. Mississippi State, decent year, but I just don't think that they would have enough to contend with Duke. Granted, the Blue Devils don't have Malik Brown. He's going to be out for the rest of the season. But guys like Tyrese Proctor, Cooper Flagg, maybe coming back. Another question is, is he going to play at 100%? What kind of effectiveness is he going to have, especially after having to miss a couple games due to, rolling his ankle, spraining his ankle. And I think if he is playing anywhere above 70-75% and he is putting 20-25 points up in these tournament games, it's going to be really hard for anybody to stop Duke, especially with the other production that they get from guys like Proctor. And sometimes, when Gillis has his good days, he'll be tough to stop. We've got Oregon and Arizona as well. Two former Pac-12 foes. I've got Arizona going through. I think that, this could be potentially the year that Arizona doesn't crap themselves in the first round like we've seen a couple years ago. When they lost to Princeton in the first round as a 2 seed. It's very common for Arizona to, have a very good season, especially where, when they were in the Pac-12 for so long. Granted, this is their first year out since basically everybody left the Pac-12. I think that this is going to be a good year for Arizona. This is going to be a good tournament. And I've got them going through over Oregon. I think that they're a more complete team. I think that Caleb Love, if he is able to do what he does, it's going to be really hard for anybody to stop him. Going to Wisconsin and VCU, it's really hard here to determine what's going to happen, but I think that Wisconsin, if they can manufacture some offense, some effective offense that puts up 80, 90 points a game like they had been for a good chunk of the Big Ten season, where they were, I think, 18-1 when they scored 70 points or more, or holding their opponents to 70 points or less, one of those two. They were, virtually unstoppable in that part, and I think that that's what's going to get them through. A10, just the VCU Rams, I just don't think that they'd have enough. If they play out of their minds, fair play to them and well done. But I think that Wisconsin's going to go through. And lastly, we've got St. Mary's, Alabama. I hate to pick against the Gales because they're one of my teams that I enjoy watching outside of, the Big 12 or the Big 10 or anything like that. But I'm going to have to go with Alabama. I think their offense, especially with guys like Mark Sears when he's able to play well, LeBaron Philon, Grant Nelson, if he gets healthy, they're going to be tough to stop, as well as Chris Youngblood. He's been playing very well this year, and I've got Crimson Tide rolling on to the Sweet 16. Duke, Arizona. This is another very interesting matchup, and I think that it's one that that we've seen in the last few years. These two teams have squared up, I believe, a couple times, and tough as I want to not see Duke go through. I want to see them out at some point. I think that they've been to this stage. They went to the Elite Eight last year in Dallas, and they would lose to North Carolina State, who lost to Purdue, and then eventually lost in the national championship to UConn. I've got the Blue Devils getting to another Elite Eight, and I think that they're one of the best teams in the nation. And Wisconsin, Alabama. If these two teams find a way to get to each other in the Sweet 16, it's going to be a real shootout. And it's really about can you make your free throws and can you make your shots from beyond the arc? Because those are going to be the two critical things that these teams tend to do very well at. But I've got Alabama going through. I think that their ability, as well as being one of the top offenses in the nation, if not the top offense in the nation, is going to propel them across the line. And now into the Elite Eight. So original, 1 versus 2. But most of the times that's the way it should be. I've got, hard to say who I've got right in this minute, but, it's about, can Duke keep the energy up? Can they keep that scoring efficiency up? But also, can Alabama find a way to break down the defense? It's for Duke. To be fair, Duke have played a couple of close games over the last few weeks, so I think Duke knows how to win close games. They came very close to blowing it against North Carolina in that ACC semifinal. And Alabama matched up with Florida in their SEC semifinal, and they just weren't hitting at the same rate that the Gators were. And I think that could hurt them if they don't find a way to, perform at that high level at this late in the tournament. So for this, being that they're the number one team in the nation right now and that they've stayed at that top level, they only lost one time in ACC conference play at Clemson. I'm going to go with the Blue Devils to make the Final Four from the East region, but no doubt it'll be a close one. And that's where I've got my first two Final Four nominees. But I think this East region is going to be a really good region, as are all of them. All right, let's take a look now at the West region, starting off with Florida and Norfolk State. Norfolk State, champions of the MEAC, grinded out a win against South Carolina State, back to the tournament yet again. They have made noise. They did upset Missouri as a 15 number of years ago, but I just don't think that the Spartans are going to be able to match the shooting firepower that Florida has shown, especially in these last 2 weeks. I'm going to go with the Gators. One is not really seeing a way that this 16 seed can find a way to get past the Gainesville squad, and I got Florida going through in this match. Another interesting match, 8-9, UConn versus Oklahoma. UConn looking to three-peat. They did the back-to-back last 2 years. They're going to have to face Oklahoma. I think that this is a team that when they're performing at their best with guys like, Solo Ball, Alex Caravan, that they're one of the best teams of the Big East. But too many times this year, I think they've let their emotions get the better of them, and that's really interfered with their play. If you think about, they lost all 3 games as a national ranked number 1. They lost all 3 games in the Maui tournament back around Thanksgiving. They lost all 3 games there, and they dropped 20-plus spots. So I think UConn's going to go through because I think that they can shoot the ball a little bit better, but I just don't think that they'll be able to go for that three-peat. I just don't think the team is as complete as it was. They had Stephon Castle last year. He's in the NBA. Donovan Clingan, and also went to the NBA. And, granted, they've still got guys, like I mentioned, like Alex Caravan bringing in Solo Ball and all that. But I just don't think that UConn – I think they'll get through the first round, but I don't see them going for the three-peat this time around. 5-12, Memphis, Colorado State. Memphis, at times they've played well. At times, when everything's going wrong for them, it just doesn't tend to get any better. They played very well in the American Championship without their main guard, Tyrese Hunter, who I consider to be a snake, by the way. Played 1 year at Iowa State, of all teams, he went to Texas after his freshman year. But hey, we got Tamin Lipsey, so I can't really even be mad. Anyways, 5-12, another potential upset here. If you remember, Memphis was the first team that FAU beat in their run to the Final Four in 2023, and that was in the 8-9. The Rams have really played well as of the last couple weeks. They grinded out a win against Boise State to end the regular season. And I think that the Rams they've been into the tournament a couple times within the last few years. Just haven't quite shown us what they really can truly do. But I'm going to go with Memphis in this one. But I don't think it's going to be an easy game for the Tigers to win. And I think that to be fair, I would not be surprised at all if they falter and the Rams go through. It'll be fair game to them. The 4-13, we've got Maryland and Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon winning the Western Athletic Conference, the WAC. Maryland losing in the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament to Michigan on the last-second coast-to-coast play. A tough loss for them. But, man, Terrapin fans, I'm sure, are going to be hoping that this game doesn't have to come down to the last play again, because each of the last at least 3 or 4 times it's come down to the last shot, they just haven't found a way to win. Think about Holloman's half-court heave. You think about the inbounds play against Northwestern in Evanston, and at Ohio State, giving up a shot with about 7-odd seconds left. This one could be an upset bid. The Grand Canyon's got big guys, and I'm going to buy into it. I think that Grand Canyon could make some noise in this. I'm going to pick them over Maryland in this. So, like I said before, my tournament bracket is probably going to get busted within the first game. I know it was when Furman beat Virginia. I had Virginia winning that game. I guarantee you that my bracket would have been at least a little bit better. But, I just play for fun and games. I'm not really here to, try and be perfect. Because I know it's not going to work. The odds of picking every one of these 63 games correctly is just ridiculously low. So
you're telling me there's a chance? Yeah!
No, I'm just going to say we'll buy into the upset. I think Grand Canyon will win that game. It's one I'm going to, watch very closely. Another good game we've got, 6 and 11. We've got Missouri and Drake here. I think that this is 2 teams that, tend to play each other pretty well. I'm going to go with the Bulldogs on this one. I think Bennett Sturts is really going to come into his own. Think about Drake. Our first-year head coach, former coach Darian DeVries, taking the West Virginia job this year. And the fact that they were able to, get back to 30 wins with a new coach and a lot of D2 transfers as well is something that has been really impressive to watch. And the way that they, just felt like they were able to ease their way through the Missouri Valley Conference tournament and go back to the big dance again was just something pretty impressive. Also, I may be a little bit biased. Granted, they're from Central Iowa, and that's where I come from as well. But I've got Drake going through 11 over a 6 in this one. In the next game, Texas Tech, 3 seed versus UNC Wilmington. UNC Wilmington is a 2 seed out of the out of what was known as the Colonial, but now is known as the Coastal Athletic Association. And they defeated the 12 seed in that tournament, Delaware, in the final, which would have certainly been one of the craziest stories, is to think of a team with such a low winning percentage such as Delaware that's this year would have been able to, make it to the tournament, almost reminiscent of what Coppin State almost did a number of years ago. I've got the Red Raiders going through. I think that they're a really good team. They've played teams like Iowa State really well. They were the only team to beat Houston in conference play, and it was on the road this year. I think that they're going to go through in this one. Now we get to probably one of the most interesting matches in all of the tournament. Number 7 Kansas in this West region against number 10 Arkansas. You've got 2 legendary coaches in Bill Self, and you've got John Calipari in his first year in Fayetteville, taking the Razorbacks back to the tournament yet again. This one's a tough one to pick, just because being more of an Iowa State fan, and I'm not very fond of Kansas at all, just because, you know, they won basically everything. This has been what I would consider a down year for the Jayhawks. 9 losses in conference, just unheard of, especially considering they're up to 20 games now in conference play. I could see either team going through, quite frankly, but I think that Kansas might get an edge because they've got guys like Hunter Dickinson who can play tough down low. They've got guys like Zeke Mayo who, when he gets hot from outside. And, you know, I think the Jayhawks will squeak through in this one. But, you know, hey, they might need an overtime to decide it. That would be something pretty special. And lastly, for the first round matches in this West region, we've got St. John's and Omaha. Omaha going to the tournament for the first time in school history as champions of the Summit League. I'm gonna go with St. John's, although one could fairly say that Omaha, with their high offensive output, could play spoiler. It's all just going to depend on how well that St. John's defense is able to suffocate the Mavericks. And can they find a way to get Zuby Ejiofor some points down low? And can they find a way to, you know, be efficient at the free throw line and from outside the arc? That's really what's going to be key in this game. And now for second round, we've got Florida UConn. I'm going with the Gators again. I just don't think that UConn is going to have the firepower nor the longevity and the consistency to go through. I think Florida over these last 2 weeks is looking like the best team in the nation, and you could argue that with Duke as well. The way that they were able to play, especially in those semifinals and in the final of the SEC tournament, really solidified themselves, I think, as a national championship contender. So I've got the Gators moving on over UConn in this game, and UConn's three-peat ended.
I'm like, what do you say fuck me for?
I'm so sick of these people. You know, oh!
And we've got Memphis, Grand Canyon. And again, another interesting game where we've got Grand Canyon with the bigs down low. Memphis has got, you know, just a solid offensive output. I'm going to go GCU on this one. I don't think that this is very familiar territory for Memphis in recent years. Yeah, they've, you know, made a national championship in 2008 with Derrick Rose as a member of that team. And I just don't see Memphis having enough or being consistent enough, especially if they don't have Tyrese Hunter, who transferred from Texas over the offseason. I just don't see them having enough or being complete enough to contend with the big guys of Grand Canyon, who can also shoot the ball very well from the outside. Yeah, I've got Grand Canyon as a 13 going to Sweet 16 in this one. You know what? Why not play with the upsets a little bit? We've got Drake, Texas Tech in the second round, 3 versus 11. As much as I would love to see Drake go through, I think Texas Tech is going to be a little bit better of a team, and there'll be, you know, guys like JT Toppin have been playing really well this year, and I think that he'll be really tough to try and stop for this Drake team. And then Kansas St. John's could go either way. You'd see probably Zuby Ejiofor, Hunter Dickinson going at it down low. Oh, and then you got guys like Smith for St. John's, Zeke Mayo. I believe DeJuan Harris Jr. is still there. I think that this could be a low seed, really low seed going through, but I don't see Kansas with the inconsistency that they've had this season.
No. Wait.
Especially with, you know, not playing very well in the conference, really hurting them. My goodness, my battery is low. We're going to try and speed through this last one a bit. All right, Florida, Grand Canyon. I'm going with the Gators. Like I said, almost a complete team, the most complete team in the nation. And Texas Tech, St. John's. As much as I think Pitino could coach them and through, and as much as I think that Texas Tech will get the win, it's really hard to tell. But man, I think Tech goes through. I don't think with St. John's not having that much of a tournament experience in the last few years is gonna hurt them. And I think Texas Tech goes through, but I think Florida from this region goes through. Pretty simple as that. All right. Well, my computer's on low battery, so we're going to try and speed through this Midwest region. We got Houston, SIUE making their first ever tournament appearance out of the Ohio Valley, but I don't think that that's going to last very long. I think Houston goes through. Pretty simple, really good guys. Juwan Roberts, don't know if he'll be coming back, but Emmanuel Sharp really played well in that Big 12 championship game and helped the Cougars get to the championship up in Calumet. Gonzaga, Georgia, this one's a spoiler. I think Gonzaga certainly haven't looked the same team that they have been in the last few years that we've known them as. It's hard to tell, but I don't think Georgia plays consistent enough to go through. So I'm gonna go with Gonzaga in this first round matchup. Clemson, McNeese. This one could be a spoiler considering the ACC didn't have maybe the best quality of teams this year, and McNeese were very dominant in that Southland Conference. I think 19-1 in conference play, and they really showed that they're one of the best teams, and they've got a pretty cool you can't even deny that they've got one of the coolest managers in all of college basketball. I'm going to play upset, and I'm going to go with McNeese in this one. They're going to win a tournament game, and I think that Clemson, when it's their day, it's their day, and they've played well. They were the only team to beat Duke in ACC play, but I don't think that that's going to convert to a tournament win for them. Purdue, High Point. This is another danger game for Purdue. They, have had a history of, faltering in the first round. We think most famously about their 116 loss to FDU. They've lost to Little Rock before in that first round. So this is another one. Tough and High Point in their first ever tournament, champions of their conference. And in the Big South. Can Purdue get their defense together? I'm gonna put Purdue through in this one. And then we've got 6 Illinois versus the winner of Texas Xavier. I'm gonna go with Illinois, although they are a bit of a danger team. They did get played closely against Morehead State. I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, but I don't think that Texas is quite good enough, and I think that Xavier, a fringe team, maybe shouldn't have got in over a team like West Virginia, like North Carolina did. But I think that Illinois goes through. Kentucky versus Troy. Troy, champions of the Sun Belt. I got the Wildcats going through. Their offense is really good, but their defense might need to help a little bit. UCLA, Utah State. Utah State, again, out of the Mountain West Conference, doing really well. UCLA, first year in the Big Ten. I'm not a big fan of Mick Cronin personally. I think that he complains a little bit too much, but that's just my opinion. I've got the Aggies going through in this one. They've played well in the first rounds of tournaments in the last few years. Then I think they matched up with Purdue a year or two ago as well. They would have been, I think, maybe last year, maybe even 3 years ago that they played Purdue. So I've got the Aggies going through. Tennessee, Wofford, champions of the Southern Conference, and I've got Tennessee going through. They made the SEC final. They're a good team. Zakai Ziegler is really good, but they just got to keep their big guys out of foul trouble, and I think that's something that Rick Barnes is going to need to emphasize to his guys is just play smart, but don't foul when you don't need to. 1-8 in the second round, Houston Gonzaga. I'm taking the Cougars again. I think that they're one of the best teams, and I think that Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs just aren't going to have enough to contend with the offense that guys like Milos Uzan and Emmanuel Sharp have. we've got in this 12-4, McNeese and Purdue. I'm going to go Purdue with this one. I just don't think that McNeese are going to be able to carry that offense against a team like Purdue. Granted, Purdue did finish a little bit lower in the Big Ten than they would have wanted this year, especially with not having guys like Zach Edey. But yeah, nonetheless, I think that the Boilermakers will make the Sweet 16. 6-3, Illinois, Kentucky. I've got Illinois going through. On this one, I think Yakichonis is really good, and when the offense gets going, and it gets hot. And Kentucky's got a high-octane offense, but they don't quite have the same amount of defense, kind of similar to an Iowa. You know, if Iowa had a defense, you know, that wasn't just, you know, if they've invested a little bit of money in their defense and not so much. Like I said, if Iowa had a defense worth of crap, then they would, they would probably have won like 12 games in the conference this year, but they didn't, and they got exploited by Illinois in the tournament for that. So I got Illinois going through. Utah State, Tennessee. I'm picking the Volunteers. I think they're just a better team, and nonetheless, you know, SEC is doing pretty well in this. So we've got one. I've got the 1 versus 4. I'm going to go with Houston again. Shame that they aren't going to be playing down at the Toyota Center in that region. They're in the Midwest region, so they may be coming to Indianapolis for some games. So yeah, I've got Houston going through over Purdue. And then 2 versus 6, Illinois versus Tennessee. I'm gonna go with Tennessee here. If they can, you know, if the big guys can get going, if Zakai Ziegler and his buddies can keep hitting threes at the rate that they have been in the last few games, I think that they'll go through. 1 versus 2 in this one. I'm going with Houston again. They're one of the best teams in the nation. Big 12 champions, and I think that is something that teams should definitely look out for. All right. Now we've got my final 4. Florida versus Michigan State, Duke versus Houston. Tough call. First, I'm going to say Duke versus Houston. I'm going to go with Duke. I think Duke are going to make the national final. I think it's going to be a close game. It's going to involve a lot of outside shooting, but it's also going to see can the big guys rebound down in the paint, and can they make the difference on the glass, especially on the offensive glass for the Blue Devils. And I think that they very well may be able to. And then we've got Florida, Michigan State. This is a tough one because these two offenses are really, really good. I'm going to go with the Gators. I think that Michigan State is really a really good team, but can they find a way to contend with Florida and be able to shut down their offense just a little bit and get themselves in? It's going to be something pretty special. And now national final, Florida, Duke. I'm going to pick the Gators. I think that the Florida Gators, there's just going to be something pretty special. And then how many tournament points? Let's just say, I think if it's a relatively high scoring game, let's just say 172 points are going to be scored in that final, and I think that's what I'm going to go with. So, well, I hope that you guys have thoroughly enjoyed me breaking down the bracket, who I think is going to go through. I enjoyed making this. I know it's going to get busted day one, but hey, we might as well just see how screwed up it gets as we get closer to April 7th and the Final Four down in San Antonio, Texas. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.